Good. Peace, family. Just taking a break, man. Thought I'd jump on here real fast. One of my one of my friends was asked me about a lot of the different dictionaries and things I have, and I just like to show people things and challenge you to study because I'm not here to debate no one. I'm not here to debate nobody's religious perspective. That's on you. I know who I am, and I challenge you to know who you are. That's it. Oh, dang, I forgot that I did myself. But what I do, I'm a historian and a spiritual guide and a map. Like I said, I'm not here to debate anyone's belief system. That's not what I'm here to do. So, I want to show y'all some things. Let me show you this. If anybody hasn't watched James Baldwin, I'm Not Your Negro, you should watch that. You should watch James Baldwin, I'm Not Your Negro. Listen to what they describe as an African. Watch, I'm gonna show you all across the board. African, a nigger that votes our way. African, a nigger that votes our way. This is the Ambrose Bierce, the Devil's Dictionary. So first they call a nigger, an African, a nigger that votes our way. Okay, we see that. Dependent, relying upon another's generosity for the support which you are not in position to exact from his fears. Okay, we know all that. Watch this. All right, let's see. Keep this in your head too, because we need to study. Hebrew, a male Jew, as distinguished from the Shebrews, an altogether superior creation. Keep that in your head. When I showed you who were the real Jews, the Igbo and the Igbo, I proved that genetically. There's nothing to argue about on that. On that context. On that context. So, we jump right into 1828 Webster Dictionary. Watch this. Oh, one more thing. Let me see something. Hold on. Mulatto, a child of two races, ashamed of both. That's what they say a mulatto is. Negro, representing him by the letter N. The Republicans began to build their equation thus: let's N equal the white man. This, however, appears to give an unsatisfactory solution. I hope y'all heard what I just said, man. Oh my goodness. Oh. What do you say? Watch this. Hold on. Let me see. Okay. Now we're going to get in the 1828 Webster Dictionary. We already know what American consists of in the 1828 Webster Dictionary. A native of America, originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper color races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. So let me get back to the Devil's Dictionary. Watch this. Let's see what they. I think I had that in there. I think I spelled my sister. Hold on. That was my other one. Okay. That was my other one. Right, that was my other one. Okay, I've been double checking. Watch this. Now, you heard what we just said what a Hebrew was, right? Watch this. So we know what a Moor is. Listen closely. A native of north coast of Africa, called by the Romans for the color of the people. Mauritania, the country of dark, complex people. The same country is now called Morocco, Tunis, Algiers. Moor, verb, transitive, to confine or secure a ship in a particular station, as by cables and anchors or by chains. A ship is never said to be moored when she rides by single anchor. So in the context, moor, we're using it as a noun. This one I described was a verb, a transitive verb. Now watch this though. Moorish, adjective, marshly, fenny, watery, along the Moorish fens in that context. But just like Jewish, Moorish, Jewish, all the things that we call ourselves Moors, the culture, the lifestyle, how we study. Moori, adjective of a dark red color. Watch this. Hebrew, noun, one of the descendants of Eber or Heber, but particularly a descendant of Jacob, who was the descendant of Eber, an Israelite, a Jew. Hebrew, adjective, pertaining to the Hebrews, as the Hebrews, Hebrews, noun, an Israelite or an Israelitish woman. Hebrew can noun, one skilled in the Hebrew language. Hebrewian, adjective, pertaining to the Isles called Hebrews, west of Scotland. I'm just touching some parameters. Just setting the stage of why, I don't know, we're going to call ourselves some Negro, blacks, and color. And we didn't call ourselves that in the first century because black wasn't used to describe ethnicity. So then we jump right into this. Oh, yeah. We jump right into this. And I'm not here to argue nobody's religious perspective. When I say it all come from a place, I'm not here to debate that with nobody or care less how nobody feel about it. The name Negro, its origins and evil use, is by Richard D. Moore's Critical Examination of Racism, Semantics, and the Use of Language and Tools of Oppression. This was written in 1960, family. And this came at a critical time in the United States. Yeah. Yeah. And it should be noted that the watershed for civil rights back then, that movement occurred just 6 years earlier with the Plessy versus Ferguson decision of 1896, which confirmed segregation as the rule of the land. It was overturned by the United States Supreme Court. Remember that? But the brief for the ruling on Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, argued by Thurgood Marshall and other lawyers of the National Association of Advance of Colored People, included significant testimony by Dr. Kenneth D. Clark regarding the low self-esteem of young African-American children. And I showed y'all the document of what the government and school said the problem with our young people today. They don't know who they are, which I teach continually in academia. The damaging psychological impact of the American caste system that constantly made an issue of race and color became better understood. So when we talk about this, man, in the early 60s, following a series of lectures on African religion before Judaism and Christianity, presented at a loft in Harlem that he designed, Moore's Gallery, Moors Gallery. Moore advanced his analysis of the term Negro. He traced the association of the word to the beginning development of slave trade and demonstrated how the term continually conveyed connotations of inferiority. These is facts. You say what? Right. And as he explained in the foreword of this first edition, the members of the audience endorsed the suggestion to form the committee to present the truth about the name Negro, and plans were made for the presentation of a formal lecture. The name Negro, its origins, purpose, and even uses was presented on May 29th by Moore at the United Mutual Life Insurance Company building. And the committee adopted a resolution and it introduced by attorney Percy E. Sutton calling for a change of name. Moore was urged to publish and expand a substantiated version. So it's significant to note that the so-called, to note that the so-called white media gave scant attention to the agitation against Negro and in favor of Afro-American. Moore was compelled to publish the book privately. As the decade progressed, the established press seemed to develop an unstable appetite for books, articles, and stories on blacks and blackness. They collected your shit. But in the 60s, there was no publisher who could expect to have an interest in a study of the pernicious use of the term Negro. And so as we get to it, from the knowledge and the history, Moore recognized that there had never been a time in Anglo-American when the word Negro had uncontested acceptance. You can see it up there. Thanks, sis. Throughout 2 centuries, to use words other than Negro, it remained indelibly fixed in American lexicon. Just like when I asked Morris, did you look that up in the lexicon when you understand the root and the etymology of words and how they're being used? Because you must understand the root, the etymology, and how words are used in certain contexts. In addition, he was curious about the origin of the term and suspicious that the connotation had become assigned because economic advantages was being sought by one group over another. Right? Moore embarked, therefore, on an investigation of the literature, not only sources in English, but in Spanish and French, to determine the link between language and oppression. Cuz, are we good? Yeah. The fact that he was not conversant in Spanish or French did not prevent him from ferreting out reference of antiquity in those languages. Let me give you our scholarship. If you don't speak a language, you must know the alphabet or the metanether. You must take the time to do the research. That's what a scholar does. When I say you must be in the test tube, in the laboratory with your test tubes and beakers to come out with the right science. That's what a doctor does. You continually in the laboratory. You must. Because we add on to the science. We must. If we in the flesh. He determined that the term had probably originated with the Portuguese and was definitely established with the slave trade. Moore reasoned that his major task in the monograph of the name Negro was to prove that the attitudes developed by one ethnic group toward another and included through language had a direct influence upon the relationship over centuries, family. Got all the research together. And so I'm just setting a highlight. So what I'm saying, family, check what I'm saying. Moore did not seek to trace the origin and use of his preferred term. He preferred to call himself Afro-American. But I'm going to show you as part of his thesis. Because remember Jesse Jackson and that African-American summit with some other officials? They got paid to call you Negro and all these terms. I'm going to show you an example of the nation. Every month they called you something. Watch. Watch. He gave examples of his use, but focused on establishing the historic link between Negro and slavery. Although he acknowledged the right of peoples to name themselves and construct criteria that might appropriately be applied, he did not feel the urgency of proving the historic significance of Afro-American or African-American. Their legitimacy was based upon meeting the criteria and the fact that Americans of African descent had already established those terms as meaningful and preferable. That's what they say. But this stuff was given to you. Like you force feed somebody some slop. Then they say they like slop. So, the analysis that Moore provided in the name Negro is origin and evil uses focus upon the concept of color and race as false divisions of the human race that are used to perpetuate power. Research Bloomback. But this polemic was only part of a broader perspective he had on class and colonism. Early in life, he had realized the race had been tied to class by instituting a segregated society. The lesson was learned in a more poignant and personal way after he left his home in Barbados. Just highlighting his life, but I want to get to this good stuff. Let me get you to some of the highlights, because I don't want to stay too much in this one, because I'm going to jump around. I'm going to jump around. Jump up and get down. Okay, so frequently two primary documents and original narrative has been lost, sometimes carelessly laid aside and even deliberately destroyed, such as the original chronicle of the Portuguese exploits in Africa written by Cerveira. But I got that, Cerveira. I got that from my connections. Mention of his early account was made by the Portuguese historian João de Barros, who began publishing The Decades of Asia in 1552. From the study of the Age of Discovery, contributed by E.J. Payne, Fellow of University College in Oxford, to the first volume of the Cambridge Modern History, 1902, revealing insights are given into the dissertation of history by following statement. The economic character of the infamous Prince Henry enterprise was felt, even in his lifetime, to be so little in accordance with the character which history demands for its heroes, that a contemporary chronicle of the Geneva expeditions compiled by one Cerveira is known to have been suppressed and replaced by the garbled work of Zurara, Z-U-R-A-R-A, whose object it was to write the infinite's Pangersy as a great soldier and eminent Christian, and the patriotic founder of the great Portugal, which posterity would never cease to associate with his name. So as you see all this, clearly all this historical writings, when the first century writers wrote, they knew exactly what they were talking about and what they saw. So the first known use of Negro as a name for slaves, check this out. The first use for Negro, for the word Negro as a noun or name in relation to African people is to be traced back to the period after 1441, when the Portuguese explorers went down the African coast until they reached below the Senegal River. They had referred to the people above that river as Moors or Azingues. Moors or Azenegues. Excuse me. But when they saw people south of the Senegal who were much darker hue and whose weapons were much less powerful than their crossbows and firearms, the Portuguese perceived the possibility of easy conquest and a lucrative slave trade. Thus, they began to enslave the African people. In such a chronicle as the Azura or Zura, Zurara, we learn how these slaves were captured. How these good Christian Portuguese knights went ashore burning homes and capturing the people. They took them back to Portugal and on a significant occasion presented the captives to Prince Henry, the infant, as they called him, the leader of these expeditions. He came in the field riding a charger, and they made a division on the enslaved Africans. Even this official Portuguese chronicle, Azura, was compiled to note the fact that the common people of Portugal, who had been given a holiday and brought from various areas to witness this new sight, were moved to tears when they saw the brutal partition and separation of mothers from children and the like. When you research Oliver Cromwell, research the European Oliver Cromwell and what he was doing in the name of Christianity. It was developed in the infamous, inquisious, and inhuman slave traffic that the term Negro was foisted as a noun, as a designation, as a name upon those who were unfortunate enough to be caught in the clutches of the slave traders. This is the origin of the term Negro. Its origin is vile and infamous. It begins in indignity. It began in immorality. And the consciousness and the dignity of man must now rise and dispense with it forever. Azura and the Cadamoso used Negroes for African slaves from below Senegal. If you consult a book like The Voyages of Cadamosto, an Italian navigator who took service under Prince Henry of Portugal in the expeditions, you can observe that the book begins by referring to the land of the blacks of Lower Ethiopia. This narrative was written sometime after 1463 and first published in Venice in 1507. The English translation by G.R. Crone was published by the Hawklett Society in London in 1937. The Europeans knew very little about Africa in those days. As a matter of fact, Prince Henry was able to begin these explorations down the coast of Africa because he had been instructed by the Moors as to the nature of the terrain, and the Portuguese, the Spanish, and Italians. Indeed, the Europeans generally had received the elements of culture, along with most of the basic scientific ideas and technical processes, which were so significant for their European development, from Moors and Saracens, scientists, and from Jewish scholars who were intermediaries, which made it possible for them to lose sight of the land and navigate on the high seas because of their ignorance of the African continent and the people at that time. European writers used the term Ethiopian for African. You will observe on some old maps that the name Ethiopian Sea is placed all the way around the bend of West Africa, even South Africa. But however, as the narrative goes along, this record of Cadamosto suddenly shifts from the terms blacks or Ethiopians to Negroes and Negres, Negress. This was done as soon as the translator reached the account of the area from which the first slaves had been taken by the Portuguese. No longer use Moors or Azengues, Azenegues, but Negroes. In the Chronicles of Azura, as soon as the area south of the Senegal River had been reached, where the modern slave trade was begun by the Portuguese, the designation of the Native Americans is changed from Moors or Azengues to Negroes, which was later transposed into English as Negroes. This chronicle of the discovery and conquest of Ghana by Gomez Enos Azura states, and I quote, eloquently with a silver tongue in the subscript of the oldest manuscript, which has come down to us, that is, was complete in 1453. The first English translation, made by Nisley and Prestage, was printed from the Hogley Society in 2 volumes, the first of these in 1896. And on page 99 of this volume, the first use in this text of the name Negroes appears in the descriptions of how Dennis Fernandez Diaz passed the land of the Moors and arrived in the land of the blacks, that is called Ghana or Guinea, however you want to pronunciate it. But when the Negroes saw that those in the ships were men, they made haste to flee. But because our men had a better opportunity than before, they captured 4 of them, and these were the first to be taken by Christians in their own land. Negroes' name for slaves differs from Negroes as color designation. From this, it appears that the term Negroes as a name for slaves was already in use in Portuguese by the year 1453. Translations and reprints must be checked back to the earliest source materials. Due care must also be taken to distinguish the name Negroes as applied to slaves and the term Negroes simply meaning black. For the same word, Negroes was used for both meanings in Portuguese and Spanish, whereas in English, Negroes was generally used for slaves and blacks for simple color designation. The usage in the Catholic Atlantis or map, dated 1375, is obviously that of Negroes, simply meaning black. The reference there to Musa Mali as Finier de los Negros de Guinea is correctly translated Lord of the Blacks of Ghana. The accuracy of this translation is confirmed when it's considered the author of this map, the Jewish cartographer. Just like I'm going to show y'all the Judah cartographer. When I showed y'all, Judah had a couple different names. But the Jewish cartographer, Abraham Sequez, could derive his knowledge of this kingdom of Mali only from the Moors, even if were secured through some intermediary. For at that time, only the Moors went thither over the caravan routes through the Sahara Desert. All that area, including Mali Empire, part of which was later called Ghana, was then known to the Moors in the Arabic language as Bilad is Sudan, which properly translated into English is land of the blacks. Hey sis, what you doing? Twist? Only a mere mention can here be made of the Azuras confusion of 2 different areas as Ghana. Likewise, attention is only called now to the discrepancy between the date which Azura gives for the completion of the chronicle in 1453 and a statement that he saw in the town of Lagos, boys and girls, the children and grandchildren of those first captives born in this land. For when these first captives are recorded by him to have been brought to Portugal, not earlier, certainly than 1443, the conclusion is clear that the intervening 10 years were altogether too short for the rearing of grandchildren by these first captives. So then when they talk about this Noah's curse, the Azura Chronicles was completed in 1453, as I quoted earlier. Then it's certain that the term Negro and Negroes were in use in Portugal by the date of 1453. Other statements in this chronicle cited hereinafter also point to the use of the term Negroes even as early as 1443. This term Negroes was then used with a new and specific meaning as a name or designation particularly applied to African slaves. These slaves had been captured and brought to Portugal from the land of Ghana, below the Sahara and south of the Senegal River. From that period onward, the name Negroes was connected to and loaded with the vicious and degrading notion of class, race, and color prejudice. In this way, the black color and other physical features of African slaves were identified in the mind of the people generally with ugliness, repulsion, and baseness. By this name, Negroes, African slaves were thereby branded as bestial and savage, inately inferior, fit by nature only for slavery, and indeed ordained by God himself for perpetual slavery. The curse of the biblical patriarch Noah was accordingly interpreted for this evil purpose by Christian ministers of the Gospels, of the glad tidings and goodwill toward men. This curse was declared to be the true and undeniable word of God, who had thereby condemned the Africans, said to be the sons of Ham, to perpetually slavery to the Europeans, conventionally held to be the sons of Japhet and the Asian people, similarly deemed to be the sons of Shem. I keep telling people, I ain't no slave. You can roll with all that you want to, but hey, whoever. Recounting how some of these first Moor slaves taken by Anton Gonzalez were exchanged in 1442 for black slaves. When I show you Hebrews and then they show you Negroes for sale, they show you the different. They was captured all over. Missouri potentially declared these to be slaves in accordance with the ancient customs, which I believe to have been because of the curse, which after the deluge Noah laid upon his son Cain, cursing him in this way, which is trash, this that his race should be subject to all the other races of the world. And from his race, these blacks descendants, Cain is said to be the son of Adam in the Hebrew and Christian scriptures. The son of Noah is called Ham, or in Portuguese, Cam, or Cham, or Sham, which might have been erroneously confused with Cain. Negroes branded ugly. Again, in describing the first considerable group of African slaves brought into Portugal in 1443, Ozuro wrote, discriminating on account of color and debasing the Negro slaves in the following words, and I quote, amongst them were some white enough, fair to look upon, and well proportioned. Others were less white like mulattoes. Others again were so black as Ethiopians, and so ugly both in features and in bodily, as almost to appear to those who saw them the images of a lower hemisphere, hell. Furthermore, in the editions of Azur's Chronicles, translated by Bernard Malley and published in London 1936 on page 173, still more slanderous statements was resorted to in order to degrade the Africans then enslaved and labeled Negroes. I say, perdition of their souls, because they were pagans without the light or flame of the holy faith, and of their bodies, because they lived like beasts without any customs of rational creatures, since they did not even know what were bread and wine, which we know is trash, nor garments of clothes. But when you read the Hebrew lexicon, the garments, everything that I wear when I have on my garments, is clearly the biblical scriptures. From my turban with the jewels on it, to my bonnet, to my tunic that's silk or cotton, short or long. Come on, man. They say the worst, their ignorance, which deprived them of all knowledge of good and permitted them only a life of brutish idleness. You hear that? This is what they think of the Negro. As immense profits to be derived from the slave traffic came to be realized, this shameful trade in human beings increased by leaps and bounds. When we talk about the history of slavery from the most remote times of our day, all these references I'm giving you by Cuban scholar Jose Antonio Sacco, unfortunately not translated into English, but I got it. My professor, he speaks fluent Spanish and all that, and so he translated all of it for me. It took us about 6 days. But we learned how the companies of Lagos and Arguim were formed. And after 1448, these two companies traded exclusively with all the points of African coast then discovered. Just like when I tell y'all what's going on Wall Street, when all my people from New York, all the history of slavery and all that, all the banks and all that, they wanted slaves more than they wanted that money. I lectured this in academia. Soon, thousands of African slaves were being brought into Portugal. All you got to do is research the Portuguese slave trade. Since these companies before 1460 already imported into the country annually 700 or 800 Negroes, Large numbers were sold into Spain and concentrated in such cities as Salamanca. Remember, the first university was created in Salamanca. Babylon and Timbuktu. Y'all can get all these books from me, man. That's why I tell y'all, if y'all connected to me, I'll build your whole library. You go to Office Max and Staples, print the books, have them on your tablet, travel all over. Teach your children some history. Instead of buying them a whole bunch of clothes and shit. Large Negroes were sold early in Spanish, and they concentrated in Salamanca and Seville. Remember a J.A. Rogers book? When I can show you how the Klan outfits, they all copy that shit from the misnumbered blacks in Seville. When they wore all that, what the Klan have on. I'm going to show you in J.A. Rogers' book. It's called The 101 Amazing Facts About the Negro. It's all in there. The European ain't nothing but a copy. No disrespect. They don't have no power. That's why I tell y'all, Europeans get all your books. They try to take all your magic and reverse it. But I'm right here to tell you that I'm loosening all the chains on that shit. Right here. And you must be initiated to have the keys. If I say I got the keys, it ain't sacred. I mean, it ain't secret. It's sacred. You must want to learn. That's the only key. So numerous had the Africans become in Seville by 1474. The Spanish monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella. In my little red book I got there in there. It's one of the biggest wars in history, was the War of Ferdinand and Isabella. Your kids ain't never heard about that? It's in the libraries. Tell your kid to go in the library. It's a red little book. It's called The Wars of Ferdinand and Isabella. I got it right in there. It's a little red book. Yes. It's a little red book. I'm going to show you. That's like so historic. All your kids should read that. Every kid should have that little red book. It's called The War of Ferdinand and Isabella. It's a red book, sis. It's like a little red book. And Isabella issued a mandate appointing Juan de Valladolid, known as El Conde Negro, or the Black Count, as our judge, and Muriel of the same Negroes, freedmen and free women. Yeah. Here you go, right here. Tell your babies, go in the library and get it. It's probably sitting right in there collecting nothing but dust. They gonna open it up powerful, powerful. If you ain't read this, I challenge you to go get this for your children. And then when they teach your kid about 1774, how they whitewashed Peter Sandler and Oliver Cornwell out of it, I'm gonna show you all that history. I did all this on the college campus. We don't need to, no disrespect to European, to do what your brother can do. We stand up and clap, no disrespect for somebody that don't look like us. What's a prophet and angel? A prophet and an angel come from amongst your own people. We don't diss academia and scholarship this way. We promote it. The term Negro required by slave system. The development of language according to the requirements of the slave system has been adaptly explained by Fernando Ortiz, professor of ethnography of the University of Havana. And it's a book I got. I hope y'all writing all these books I reference. Y'all can get them from me. It's The Illusion of Races. It is to be deplored that this outstanding book has not been translated and thus made available to English-speaking people. I got that translated as well. See, a lot of the work I did in academia, y'all, is translating a lot of those Spanish books. Because a lot of that stuff we haven't touched, and a lot of it, our history in there. A lot of stuff when you saw like MOHR or how they changed their names and try to throw you off the breadcrumbs, all in their history. If the Moors ruled Spain for all these years, it's very simple to start connecting the dots and stop set tripping. Stop using religion to separate you. It's very simple when you come from light. The origin of evil use. with the word race. It happened as with the word Negro, which was extended through European and American from Portugal and Spain by the trades in African slaves since the 15th century. Before that time, there had been use in several European languages, including those of Iberia, the respective words indicative of dark color, of pigmentation, in order to designate black slaves, blacks in English, and Noirs in French, Noirs. When the trade spread, there prevailed in these lands other words derived from the Hispano-Portuguese Negro, such as nigger in English and nigger in French. And all these words had a contemptuous meaning as related to slavery, even today in the French language, as distinction is made between the words noir and negre, as in English, black is differentiated from nigger and from negro. Wow. Like even in the Middle Ages and even the beginning of the modern era, there was no people who did not frequently suffer the enslavement of his sons. Thus, the blacks who were taken from the lands below the Sahara and the blacks of Mauritania, Barbary, and Egypt, like the whites of the Baltic and of the Caucasus, and all the pigments of Asia and of Slavonia, even to the quince colored Gonchis, later the Indians of the New World. Thus there have been slaves, those who were pagans and Jews, as well as Christians and Muslims. Muslims, Moslems. He made a difference. Muslims. No Negro land. Some writers who have followed after the invaders of Africa have even attempted to denote that there were pleas to call Negro land, although such a place never existed. But since a Negro had been predicted, it was necessary also to predicate a Negro land. However, this has never been geographically defined and never can be. There is no Negro land. There is a continent of Africa, quite clearly geographically defined, with the Mediterranean on the north, the Atlantic on the west, and on the east, in the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea, which reaches up the isthmus of the Zeus, and the isthmus brings us back to the Mediterranean on the north. This is the land of our forefathers. Now, if remember of the other forefathers too, I shall state that in the culture of the dominant forces do not challenge the character of these other ancestors of mine, but they have seen fit to challenge and to degrade my ancestors' forefathers. Therefore, it is these whom I must defend. It is my African ancestry, which is challenged, that I will defend to the hilt. That's what he's saying. Shakespeare misapplied. What is the purpose of the word Negro when you say this word is objectionable? There are those who reach back for a quotation from Shakespeare. Remember he used that in Othello about the rose and the other terms. The reference was wholly irrelevant, straight to the point indeed, were the same author's apt and precedent lines in Othello, the Moor of Venice, which treat directly on the significance of a name, right? Come on, man. Indictments to massacres. The record of history makes it clear that after the abolition of chattel slavery, the attempt was ruthlessly made to keep the freedmen down. All this stuff in history. Another author wrote, Rowan Helper, in the book Nojoqui or Nojoqui, Nojoque. This was written in 1867. Who branded the Negro in one chapter as an inferior fellow, done for, and in another deemed removals, banishment, expulsion, extermination. Research the doctrine of discovery and all that stuff in history. What you think that stuff was about? As a result of such monstrous incitements, over 40,000 Afro-American citizens were massacred during the Reconstruction period in the South by the Klan, the white communists, and such terrorist gangs. Many European American citizens who endeavored to uphold democratic rights for all were also brutally murdered during this period of frightful reaction in the South from 1865 to 1876. Research the Wilmington's White Man's Constitution. The Wilmington's White Man's Constitution. You probably never heard about that. You probably never heard about how they organized and told them Negroes, you got till sundown to get the hell out of our area. Research it. But they were brutalized during these times, 1865 to 1876, when you see the aftermath of slavery written by William A. Sinclair. Also in 1905, the American Book and Bible House at St. Louis, Missouri, published a book of Charles Carroll entitled The Negro Beast. My members, I'm sure y'all got that. But created with articulate speech and hands that he may be of service to his master, the white man, through poised pen and vicious pictures, such as the birth of a nation, which is still being shown despite protests and all that stereotype, built up the public mind of the Negro as a beast, a creature retarded by nature with the mentality of a child. See how they did that on Baby Boy, the introduction? And at worst, a savage, bestial monster who must be kept at bay while forced to labor for his superiors, and who is ultimately to be destroyed. This name Negro, with all its vicious associations, must therefore certainly be abolished. Out of this system came the predication of these names, such as Native, Kafir, Kaffir. And I heard somebody misquote that. It ain't got nothing to do with you not believing in no Islam. That's if you call yourself a Negro. Munt, M-U-N-T, and the like, with all the contempt and degradation which go with them inevitably. In the United States and in the Caribbean, we have different forms of oppression. When you research stuff, evil use of native, Kafir, Kaffir, is Negro. The evil use of this name, Negro, has been projected to stigmatize and to brand people of African descent. Whatever you want to say, man, African origin descent, whatever. Descent from degradation, for oppression, and for exploitation. If there were any doubt as to this, then what has happened in relation to the gruesome event in South Africa ought to clarify the murky misunderstanding that might exist. So all this stuff happening, the examples of Christian apartheid, all this stuff that we can talk about. So when the Dutch rulers denied Africans use of the name, regarding the attitude of the present apartheid minority rule of the Union of South Africa, who, although a relatively recent immigration from Holland, actually called himself the Afrikaner, the man of Africa. Mr. Patton wrote the following: he even refuses to grant the black Africans the use of the word African. The black African used to be a Kafir. Let me pause here to explain what Kafir or Kafir really means and connotes. It means an unbeliever, a heretic, and you should mark that in the period of the Inquisition before the 15th century in Spain and other European countries, the term heretic was a brand for destruction. When they call you a heretic, then you were headed straight for the torture chambers of the Inquisition and for death. Likewise, when the Dutch invaders called the Africans Kafirs, when they called the Africans Kafirs, that is, heretics, they were branded them for destruction. Mr. Patton went on to say, the black Africans used to be a Kafir. Today he is a native or a Bantu. It is necessary to make a clarifying comment, as was done in the open letter, which our committee sent to the New York Times. Doubtless Mr. Patton used the adjective black in order to identify the indigenous inhabitants of South Africa. But it must be pointed out here that this is a loose term which cannot be wholly separate from its racist overtones. Africans generally resent the term Negro. Before I conclude, there are a few things to which I must call attention. In the first place, I wish to point out that Africans themselves, there may be an minute exception here and there, Africans generally, by and large, recent term Negro. Let me quote from the Barbados Observer of Saturday, April 23rd, 1960s. It seems strange that I did not pick this up in the African American press here. However, here it is. Africans object to the term Negro. New York Press, the Associate Negro Press, a lesson in how South Africans, both white and black, refer to themselves, was given over the video waves recently during one of Dave Garroway National Broadcast Company early morning Today programs. Dave was interviewing four young men from the Union of South Africa, Maxwell Stern, graduate student at Columbia University. And you can pull all this stuff up from back in the day. I was showing it with my sis back in the early day. They be debating. And Bernard Schumann, graduate student at Massachusetts Institution of Technology, both white, and Professor Gazani of the University of NATO and Bermuda, Carina, and expatriate, in laying the groundwork for a discussion of the recent South African massacre. Garrett referred to Karen as a Negro. Then the following exchange took place. And I don't want to go all into it, but it was a good dialogue to have. So let me give you a little bit of history real fast, because we almost done with this. The African Lodge of Masons was set up by Prince Hall, whose address to the lodge in 1797 speaks of African Ethiopian, but never Negro. The militant and powerful appeal of David Walker, published in Boston in the year 1829, was addressed to the colored citizens of the world, but in particular to those of the United States of America. The early poet Phyllis Wheatley, who had been brought from Africa to Boston, wrote in 1772 of Africa and Ethiopia, or Ethiop, only once falling into the use of the name Negroes. Obviously, however, this use was due to her Christian teachings and all that stuff. We know how we get caught up in things, but it is what it is. Our right to full citizenship. It should be made clear at all times we are Americans with African descent, or whatever you want to call it, Moorish descent, whatever you want to call it. And it should be affirmed that if any group of people have a claim of full citizenship to a proper status in the United States of America, you should be able to understand that you're a Moorish American, what type of American you are. You are an American, period. That's it. The rest of the science you must be taught. I'm not going to divulge on that right now. All that other stuff that you see on the internet, that sovereign citizen, I don't care if you call yourself a more illegal. Can't nobody nationalize it, denationalize you. No ID ain't going to do nothing. All that shit is fugazi. I call it Fuji dust. That's what I call it. But we are thus entitled to be called Americans. What type of American? Moorish American. I don't care what type of American you call yourself. I know who I am. I don't care what nobody say, or this, that, and the other, whatever, man. I have the right to tell you who I am. I proclaim, declare, have due process. I know what it's all about. I tell you, I have no problem with it. The problem is people don't know who they are. And that's where I leave it. Like, let me see. I think it's on page, let me see. I think it's on page 31. In our Exhumed Other Nation. I told y'all when you research the African Americans, I think it was the African American something, when Jesse Jackson them came up with a name to call you, we'll call them this, we'll call them that. So listen to in the Baltimore Evening Sun, Monday, February 3rd, 1992. Listen to this. We almost done. I have a plan, Delegate Rawlings. Bill should be amended to designate an official name for Black people each month of the year. Think there isn't room in the nomenclature? Pursue the following list. Gregory P. Kane. If African American does not please, here are 11 more by Gregory P. Kane. Baltimore Delegate Howard P. Rawlings has proposed a law to have Maryland's Black population referred to officially as African Americans. Forgive me if I don't emit a scream of ecstasy about the notion. At the tender age of 40, I have already been called three things: colored, Negro, and Black. In that order. And I have no desire to be called something else in my lifetime. Ain't that a bleep, bleep, bleep? No, that's playing. But 10 to 15 years from now, someone else would be proposing still another change. I have a plan to prevent that. Delegate Rawlings' bill should be amended to designate an official name for black people each month of the year. Think there isn't room for the nomenclature? Pursue the following list. Just like when I say, hey man, Negroes celebrate everything, they ain't celebrate what? Native American Week, they ain't celebrate Indigenous People Day. They did that right around Christopher Columbus, so-called discovery fake shit. And this is what I'm teaching the kids in history school and the colleges. When I go on campus every Wednesday, I make my way. Eventually, I'm gonna have my own elementary school, campus, everything. Just like we be on Instagram, I be sending all the people, no disrespect again. When they send our kids to different nationalities and they be all coming up with these high fives and everybody be on Instagram all happy and cheerful. But I say, what the hell they teaching your kids? After the 1, 2, 3s and basics. But what they teaching them? Nothing. Ooh, and we can send him to the barbecue. Why? Because the mother can do a damn Dougie dance and they doing a high five with your kids. That should be crazy to me. But, you know, to each his own. But anyway, 10 to 15 years from now, someone else will be proposing still another change. I have a plan to prevent that. Delegate Rawlings. The bill should be amended, and here it goes. January, official designation will be colored. It's old and dated, but we'll find there are some blacks and whites comfortable with it. Yeah, true. February, official designation would be Negro. This term has been designated by black nationalists who claim it was invented by Western anthropologists as a part of a white racist supremacist agenda. According to the nationalists, here's how the scam worked. Any black people in Africa who showed no sign of civilization were classified as Negro. Blacks who were clearly just as dark or darker, but who showed signs of being civilized were classified as Hamites and conveniently placed in the Caucasus race or the Caucasian race. Just like when I told y'all what was a Hebrew in the Devil's Dictionary, I showed y'all this, man. Look, I'm telling you, they be telling on themselves. That's why I say you have to be able to decipher the linguistic apartheid. Hebrew, a male Jew, as distinguished from the Shebrew, an altogether superior creation. And then I show you in the 1828 dictionary, right? I mean, I show you. Come on, man. Hebrew, noun, one of the descendants of Eber or Heber, but particularly a descendant of Jacob, who was the descendant of Eber, an Israelite, a Jew. And then I showed you genetically who the Eber, when I showed you from in Nigeria, the Igbo and the Igbos, Igbo land, and the European agrees with me, it's nothing to argue. None of my people should be arguing. When I give you proof, scientific proof, genetic proof, everything, the whole, it's nothing else to talk about but to support what we should. I call this a scam because some Western writers have admitted no physical evidence of a Negro race has been found. March, official designation would be black. This term has gone from one opium to call someone black in the colored Negro days could actually start a fight to one of acceptance to one that is now no longer good enough. I suggest keeping it around. We may have to use it again. Wow. April, official designation would be Afro-American. Some have objected to this term, claiming it does not adequately define blacks as an ethnic group, but it's worth keeping. May, official designation would be African-American to make Jesse Jacksons and Pete Rawlings of the country happy. When I started talking about the Boule, when I started going back to Stephen Coakley, when I show you all this, you got to get that you white man stuff out your face. You got to let that go. Get that spookism gone. Don't nobody have no power over you. And you got brothers out here that's elite, that's illuminated, that's the enlightened ones. One that ain't bit that apple, one that's just illuminated. We got those that's like that. That's anointed and consecrated. Not just talking, on both levels. Like the kids tell me when I be lecturing to them, they don't like me because I'm educated, they like me because I'm dope. That's what they say. And I make it relatable. I show them that you can overcome anything as long as you got this and the right system around you. June, official designation would be Asiatic. This to appease the annoying bilious members of the set known as the Moorish Science Temple. I thought they didn't know about that. Here you go. If I understand the limited ramblings of the temple members correctly, there is no African continent. Africa is merely part of a larger continent of Asia, which was originally inhabited by black people. Hence, blacks are Asiatic. There, that cleared up the confusion, didn't it? Now here it is, July, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, the 7th month. Officially, designation would be Moorish American. What's your nationality? What's your race? Asiatic. What's your status? Your status, free white. When they put that in your face and it says choose all three that pertain to you, Negroes that think they smart, I'm just gonna check another box and say other, put more. That ain't what I asked you. It said pick all three pertaining to you, all three pertaining to you. But it says pick all that pertain to you, but it's three that pertain to you. I'm telling you science. If you don't, nobody have to agree with me. July, official designation would be Moorish American. This again would be in defense to the members of the Moorish Science Temple, who maintain that while their race is Asiatic, their nationality is Moorish American. I say we honor them. I say, not honor, excuse me. I say we humor them for the month of June and July. So for the month of June and July, they respected your nationality and your race.
He said it.
The Baltimore Evening Sun, Monday, February 3rd, 1992. Come on, somebody. Come on. Provided they shut up the rest of the year. Wow. August official designation would be Balalian. This comes to us from the Worthdian Muhammad, who formerly was Worthdian Muhammad, who originally was Wallace Muhammad. Wallace Muhammad was Elijah Muhammad's successor as the leader of the Nation of Islam, Black Muslims, and changed the name of the organization to the World Community of Islam and then to the American Muslim Mission. Between all of these changes, he put forth his case for calling Black Americans Balalian. Bilal, an Ethiopian, who was the Prophet Muhammad's first convert, was also the man who initiated Islam's call to prayer. In Wardith Muhammad's worldview, Black American converts to Islam's word, in essence, issuing a call to prayer to other American blacks to return to their West African Islamic roots, much as Bilal issued to the call for all Muslims hundreds of years ago. For such inspired and creative, if somewhat convoluted logic, I say we reward Wardeen Muhammad for 1 month. September, officially designation would be Nubian, a term preferred by some Black nationalists in memory of Black state of ancient Egypt's southern boundary that competed with Egypt for regional hegemony. You see that? So I just wanted to walk y'all through a little something, man. Don't let nobody get you caught up in fake history. No more, nobody. Not me, not you. No one. I do this for scholarship. I travel all over and I jump on here to show my brothers and sisters, to try to spark something, to bring you to learn. Because the Burning Bush Tabernacle Science Temple of School is an institution. No matter what you're doing, you should want to come study and learn, no matter where you're going to learn. I don't diss nothing. I connect it. Especially historicalness. You must know history. And it's not just the books. We must build. We must build. But I'm going to leave it at that because I've been going for a little minute and I've been going for an hour. I don't want to show no more. I just wanted to show you that term. We got to get out of that and get into studying and share it. Share with our people. I want people to come to class. We're not doing no more Sunday school and adapt class on YouTube and Instagram because we do it all privately now. Man, small donations, man, you can get all literature and build your library. You don't have to go to other platforms like, I don't like to talk about what you know, where people say, oh, we got to spend our $5, I'm more $1, this, where I have a platform of wisdom and books. And then if you know me, you can just hit me up and say, hey, man, I was looking for this book. Or if you can leave messages on mypdfbooks.com. But if you connect it to me, man, all I do is go in my database and boom, boom, and you can download all these books on your to your tablet. Go to Office Max and Staples and print them and build your library up. I have expensive books on my company page for way smaller than you'll get the hard copy book, and you just go to Office Max and Staples and print it. But when I be lecturing and on books and things, like you can get all these books, the stuff from me. A lot of the like all these books, my nobles and a lot of people that know me, especially college students, they get all their books from me and they download them on their tablet. The ones that they want to write in, they just go to Office Max and Staples and have them print them. They write them. They give them the gifts for other people that's into what they into, and they print them again. So I just wanted to share that with y'all, man. But go pick up this from your local library. It's probably sitting on the shelf. Tell your kids to go get it. I guarantee you, if it ain't on all of their shelves, it's on a couple of them just sitting there. I guarantee you. And tomorrow I'm gonna show y'all the Battle of Bunker Hill, how they whitewashed how they whitewashed Oliver Cromwell and Peter Salmon out of the pictures of Battle of Bunker Hill in 74 and 75. What they teach your kids in so-called history, and I'm gonna show you all through that in history. I'm gonna show you all those brothers in history, all in politics, where you didn't know. But then also, I add on to it. Like I said, I don't discredit no elder, no nothing. I saw somebody discrediting John Henry Clark trying to say this. I said, no, you add to it. We don't discredit our elders because if a person is not learned, one of our prolific scholars was this brother, Sheikh Anadiab, and none of his writings could be refuted. And so when brothers be thinking they know something, and I always coming from a European perspective, I said, why do we do that? Why do we do? They try to do the same thing to our scholars back then, and then that's what we do today, try to discredit our ancient scholars. That's done the work. Anthropology, all the work. That's done the work, and then people get a little tittle of wisdom and want to debate all that. Then I say, well, what work have those people been doing? Where have they lectured at? That's why I say our people be so quick to say some shit. Just be sitting in a little bitty ass corner in a room talking some shit, and they life be in shambles. Like I saw somebody on this dude page, a heavy dude, and he's working out, he's getting in shape. Person on there talking cash shit about him, and this is a grown man. People look this man up and just went ziggity boom on like, man, you have no business be talking like, look at your crazy self. And that's what I be saying what we do. We try to discredit things, and I say, man, it's nothing to discredit. The work has been done. And if people haven't went and done the work, or at least a tittle of the work that these brothers done back in the times, what can a brother say that's just sit at home? And when the person asks him, did you go to college? Did you go to academia? Did you do this? What have you been in the library, or have you been in the laboratory with your test tubes and your beakers? Have you traveled to different countries? Have you had connections at different universities? This, and that, and the other? No, no, no. They'll tell you they study at home, or they watch YouTube videos, or they bought a book, one book, or some shit like that. After a person's whole life work, a Negro will say they know something. And I'll be like, man, we should be slow to speak. We should add on and use things to build on, not destroy life's work. Because if a person ain't studied none of Sheikh Anadiab's work, and John Henry Clark converted a lot of it to in English. If you pull up a lot of Sheikh Anadiab lectures, he didn't speak English. So when brothers be discrediting things, man, I tell them to get all Sheikh Anadiab books if you can. I got them all for you. I got a full library. That's why I tell our brothers to be slow to speak. Because if we say we know something matter of factual, which none of us do, and I can build on something, it's like somebody say, oh man, math is the only thing, and I show them multiplication. And I say, I get that math, but we can multiply too. And you just diss multiplication. Or you don't want to add on too. Or you learn multiplication, you're going to diss mathematics. That don't even make sense. I will hope you learn how to add before you multiply. Just like to get to Friday. I hope you understand to get to Friday, you got to go through Thursday. That's why the right mental we have to have. We build on to science. We don't destroy. That's what the scripture says. I'm not here to destroy. I'm here to fulfill. And I'm in the flesh. And as the educator and as the scholar and as your brother and as your sister, I'm able to add on to the science. Add on to the science. To synchronize the teachings. And that's what we're here to do. And with that being said, man, I love y'all, man. Peace, light, and illumination.